So we're going to start with a check-in question today. Thanks for this, Meredith. So if you were a vegetable, what vegetable would you be and why?
I think I'd be aubergine. I don't quite know why, maybe because my hair is purple most of the time.
So I would be kale, just because it's one of my most favourite vegetables, and I love everything green, and I love green, and it's really healthy and good for you, and it can be used in so many variety of ways. Like you can fry it, or you can put it in a salad, or you can make it into chips, or that's pretty versatile too. Peace back.
I'm happy to pick up there. That's a pretty funny question. I would be a potato. I would be a potato. I think potatoes, you know, have helped people over the centuries. You know, it was the sort of an essential thing that can grow anywhere, pretty much. Like, and a little bit. It can handle a bit of a rough ride. They look pretty rough too. You don't have to be too gentle with them. They're easy to handle. I'll leave it there. Peace back.
I think it would make a good combination. I could throw in carrots to the potatoes and the kale and the aubergine. I really like carrots. We have some really yummy potatoes in the fridge right now, and they're the perfect combination of sweet and tasty. And yes, carrot would be mine. It's also healthy.
I'm torn. I don't know which one to choose. I originally thought of broccoli because I do love broccoli, but then I wasn't quite sure why I did broccoli. And then I started thinking about what else do I love, what other vegetables, and I thought about sweet potato, which I love because it's really versatile and it's very hardy and, you know, pretty inexpensive and can be pretty nourishing. So yeah, I might have to.
Thanks, Meredith. So we're going to invite Karime here to have a chat about our question today is how do we build the bridge from serviced client to valued citizen? And I just got to say I'm honoured and privileged to know Karime, and not only just know you, I hope it's okay, but I consider you a friend, and you know, we've still got a one day to party on down at the clubs in Brisbane once this COVID crap's over, but that's still on the agenda. But I've had the privilege of knowing Karime over the last few years, a bit more so as well. And Karime, if you want to, you know, kick us off, but really keen to hear your perspective of, you know, what you've done with your life to build that bridge from a serviced client to a valued citizen.
Sure. Thanks, Michaela. Appreciate that. Yeah, likewise. You know, I'm very grateful to be here today and hopefully provide some good feedback and you know, discuss this topic with you guys a bit more and hopefully give some helpful information. So, as Michaela just said, I'm Karime Baylis, and I'm 23, and I'm a DJ producer. Currently not DJing due to COVID and restrictions of bars and clubs and just really the entertainment industry in general. But yeah, I think the question here, how do we build the bridge between service to client to citizen is a very valuable question, because I think it's something that isn't talked about a lot, and it's really hard to find that sort of goal where, service providers do, I guess, take things and listen to the client and their needs rather than just assuming what they need.
Thanks, Karime. Do you want to tell us a little bit? So I want to give everyone a bit of a picture. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what was it like when you were using service providers for your supports?
Sure. So when I was using service providers, won't name names as such, but one service provider in particular was kind of ended up gaining a name for being quite late and with their workers turning up late and not on time. So it was really hard to have sort of I guess a kind of a life and organize appointments and programs around that, because if I didn't know who was coming at what time, and let's just say, I don't know, John down the road was due to come at 9:30 and he didn't rock up till 10:30, or almost, an hour and 30 minutes late for my appointment. That's not good. So yeah, it's just the little things like that that are really inconvenient. Plus also having, building a sort of, I guess, a relationship between you and a particular support person is very important to someone like myself. So having someone different each day doesn't feel right, because I feel like, say for an example, if you're say having help with someone who is giving you a shower or something like that, you want to feel comfortable within your own skin. You've got to trust them. It can't just be any old stranger off the street. So there's a really quite a high level of trust, and I guess, quite a high level of trust and security involved in a relationship like that.
Yeah, for sure. And so, so how do you employ your support workers now? How does that happen for you now?
So honestly, we used to use, and still do from time to time, use a platform called Higher Up. That was really good. And then from then on, we sort of stepped back a little bit, and pretty much it was just been from word of mouth, pretty much. I'm a big believer in, like, anyone can be a support worker, in terms of, they don't have to have any qualifications as such, because skills can be learned and acquired. But attitudes you can't change. It's unless they want to change, which is often very rare sometimes.
And so do your workers now, so just for Sandra's benefit, Higher Up is like a platform where support workers put their profiles up, and then people go and choose the support workers from their profiles in their local area. And that's a great way to work out, who you want. And so I'm assuming, Karime, you choose who you want, or the word of mouth thing is great now, but do you have workers that do a little bit of everything, or do you have workers who are specific for certain things in your life?
That's kind of a hard one. I mean, at the moment, I sort of had a support worker who did a little bit of everything except for personal care, but normally I like to keep things quite, I guess, categorized, and sort of have very specific people for very specific things. So like, I might have Angie, who comes in the morning and gives me a hand in the shower and with getting breakfast and waking me up and getting prepared for the day. And then I might have Michael, who takes me to see my exercise physiologist and sort of help me with all my sort of exercises and that kind of stuff. For all my academic work, like, because I'm currently learning to get my license at the moment during COVID. So I would have someone else to help me in that period.
Yeah, cool. So do you make sure that they've got the skills or the interest for the area of work that they're helping you with?
Yeah, pretty much. So I normally, like how it would go, I would sort of meet them first, suss them out, and just go with the vibe and see what they like. So try and, you know, focus on what their main skill is. So maybe say, I don't know, Alex, his main skill is that he used to be a qualified chef, and I want to know how to cook more. That's great. Okay, awesome. That is one really important skill that I need that's already there. And then sort of we can build on that and then sort of go from there instead of sort of having someone that, I guess, already has been sort of through the whole, I don't want to say institutionalized, but it's the only one that's kind of coming to mind. Sort of background and thinks that, you know, they have all the skills when they don't as such. It's sort of a hard topic, but I feel like it's just one of those things where, you know, they just think that with one course or anything, they can sort of just tackle it.
Yeah, got you. And you were saying before, Karime, how you know, some skills can be learnt as far as support work is concerned, but there's an attitude that can't be learnt. What kind of attitude do you look for in people?
Definitely like a can-do positive attitude. So someone who's really outgoing and who's like, yeah, awesome, you know, I'm really keen to work with you, you know, I love your energy, like just is really happy about life in general. One thing I try and avoid the most, which is hard to do, and you can teach people along the way, is that kind of sort of like, oh wow, you know, you're a DJ, that's really inspiring, sort of that sort of, yeah, that's one attitude I sort of try to avoid if I can. It's not so much, I understand it comes from a very good place. I'm not trying to diss that or say it's bad as such. I think it's very much an image thing, and that's just something that we have problems with in today's society, and that's pretty much, I guess, with anything. But trying to stay on topic here, I feel like a lot of this disability sort of service providers type thing is very sort of, I guess, not looked down upon, but very sort of inspiration porn, because a lot of people may think, well, you know, if I'm sore, I can't get out of bed in the morning, but like, look at this guy who's only got one arm and he can swim. Wow, you know, he's amazing. So like, just because that guy can do it, if he were the normal guy, if he were the normal able-bodied person, would he still be inspiring to you? Or is it just because of his challenges that he's inspiring?
I love that terminology, inspiration porn. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
you
get
can
it.
thank Meredith for that one. She introduced me to that quite a while ago.
I did introduce you to that, but I cannot take credit for it. It's actually from Stella Young, who's a very well-known Australian disability advocate.
Yeah, cool. So do you want to tell people a little bit more about what you're doing that makes you feel like a valued citizen? What are you doing in your life that makes you feel like that?
So I may use a bit of past context if that's cool, because currently it is a little bit challenging, if you like, but I'll try and keep it as present as possible. So about, I want to say like close to a year ago, or just maybe even the start of this year, I started working at a club, a nightclub in Brisbane called Subversa. They're sort of like a, what would you say, like a underground progressive sort of house club. And they have different nights where they do different styles of music. And that was sort of the first time that I've ever fully worked a job, not because not because I can't, but because I wanted to. And it was sort of like, I've always had this mindset where it's like, I know I don't have to work because I have my disability support pension to fall on and whatnot. But I feel like getting out in my community and finding, I guess, my tribe, my group of people that I fit with, it can be like really rewarding, and it doesn't really matter so much about the money at the end of the day. Of course, a bit of payment is always nice because it always, ends up feeling like you are really contributing to that part of society. And that's something that Subversa definitely did. I've got to experience a lot, which I think really opened my eyes. And some of that was like working in a team environment. So we have a team of like 20 people tops, or maybe more. And so it was all about having to communicate really well, having to be good at time management. So it was a lot of skills that I didn't necessarily have a lot of when I left school or were taught. So that was really interesting, and how to work under time, because I don't work under pressure very well. So that was always very interesting, since it was around a lot of high pressure situations, especially when dealing with, like, say, drunk and drug affected people. That was also quite a very different side that I haven't seen before. And I feel like that's another thing with coming into sort of disability services, is when they have programs and stuff like that, they want it to be as risk-free as possible. And a nightclub certainly isn't one of those places. There are a lot of risk, and I get why they want to have a program like that, but you can't wrap someone up in bubble wrap and expect them to be fine for their whole entire lives. You have to live a little, and of course, go out and experience things for yourself, but in a safe way. Do it with someone who you can trust. And I think that's what Subversa for me really was. It was an environment where I felt safe, where I was around people like myself, and I felt part of a community, and like I was giving back, and really learned a lot from that. So very grateful for that opportunity.
And hopefully that'll come back as well anyway, with the restrictions easing as well. But
Totally.
yeah. You're working, I thought I heard the other day, but you're working this weekend, is it?
Yeah, there's a little reunion party, so looking forward to that. That should be very fun. I think that's one thing that's been really hard, is for a lot of people to understand and to sort of find a new sort of job, particularly within the entertainment industries. So I would often start work at like 9 o'clock and wouldn't finish till like 3 in the morning. So I am definitely not a morning person, but has definitely taught me a lot. And I think is something that perhaps service providers, not to implement everything into their programs like this, but definitely take a look at, like maybe having some sort of I guess, program where they can go in with a support worker and sort of trial these, I guess, risk environments in a safe way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, every 23-year-old should be clubbing every now and again until 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like a rite of passage. And, you know, I mean, we've all done it. And it's something, you know, the more I talk to people about it, especially older people, you know, and some of the stuff they've done back in the day, I just go, wow, you know, that's pretty crazy. I feel like, you know, why is it that we get and receive the image that we as people are generally so sheltered? Like, why? I didn't get it.
Yeah, totally hear you. I just wanted to see if anyone's got any questions for you, and then we're going to not sure whether maybe not have a breakout room, but maybe just open up the conversation altogether. But we'll first ask if anyone's got some questions for you, Karime. Sandra.
Yes, thank you very much. Karime, thanks for sharing your ideas and parts of your experiences. I would be interested in what sparked your change, or how did you actually manage to get out of the service providers and get into hiring your own supports and kind of taking the direction of your life in your hands?
I love that question so much. I hate it. No, it's a real no. Please don't be sorry. It's a really good question. I think that like actually makes you think. So from what I can remember, and please tell me if I miss anything. So I didn't feel like anything was working for me. So I just sat down with mom and said, look, nothing's working for me. I dislike how I'm sort of being treated, and you know, I want to be able to have experiences of my own. Can you help me find a way that is possible? And so it wasn't always a success at start. You know, there was lots of trial and error, and it was something that we had to, I guess, just experiment with really and just play around with. And yeah, we sort of just thought, well, why not we try some mutual friend of ours? And that's how it often started. And I know it's sort of weird to think, but it's sort of like they had skills that were really, really good, and they were just honestly very good people and sort of looking for work at the time. And so it sort of was like right time, right place, and sort of just happened from there. And, you know, not only did good friendship come out of it, but, you know, also benefit me and help me through many things. Like, you know, when I went to study at a private college and studied music production, I had a friend who was a musician, and she was very helpful in the 2 years that I studied there.
Thank you. Could I add just one sentence to explain my question?
Yeah, sure.
Because I have people that I know that really would benefit if they get the idea or have like a first intuition about how to take over the reign of their life. So that's why I was asking. So thank you so much.
Yes, not a problem. I think it's definitely a very big thing to do. It can be a little overwhelming at times, and sort of like what's going to happen sort of thing. But honestly, I think it's different for everyone else. But I can honestly just speak for myself here and say it is the best thing I've ever done for sure. Yeah, 100%.
I've got another question, Karime. We were talking this morning about how in service provider land that the expectation on people with disabilities is really quite low. And and so they tend to have minimal ideas for dreams about their own life. Were there any things that you did that helped you to dream about what you wanted in your life?
Yeah, definitely. Another good question that makes me wish I had thought out a bit more. For one thing, like, I'm a dreamer. I'm a very big person in a way where, I just sit and dream for hours, depending on who you ask, mostly my mum, she'll say, yeah, he's off with the fairies, really quite has a lot of big dreams, which is a good thing and a bad thing in some cases. But getting to your question, I think it was more just I wanted to challenge them, and not just challenge the service providers, but challenge the system in general. I'm definitely one to push things, I guess, and sort of interested in seeing how far things can go until it's like, okay, well, there's my limit, and I'm probably not going to consider something like that. So it's sort of, I guess, my dreams sort of made people question themselves, and were like, well, okay, I don't know how to support you, so we're gonna sort of let you go and do that on your own, because we don't want the responsibility if anything bad happens to you. And it's like, well, fair enough, I get that. That's loads of paperwork for you. How fun.
So now I want to ask you, what's your biggest dream?
That's quite a scary one. I have a few of them, and they sort of all revolve around music. It's something I just often think about, because talking about it it doesn't scare me. It's sort of just like, I don't know how it's gonna work or even happen. So one of them is I would be interested in looking at how I can move to the UK, because the music that I'm into is fairly big over there, and is originated from there, and I have been getting some opportunities over there, and I'd like to be able to pursue them and see what's out there. So that, I think, would sort of be the very long end goal of sort of seeing how that would work. And obviously, I wouldn't just straight up move over there. I'd probably visit a couple of times, and obviously having COVID around doesn't help at all. But you can always dream.
Starts with the dream, eh?
Very true, very true. Yeah.
I might just jump in there and just say hi to Karim. Nice to meet you, Karim. Thanks for sharing your story or stories with us.
Likewise, mate. Nice to meet you.
And there's a part of me that feels that I've met you before, and that's probably because you have a big fan in Meredith, in your mum, and she shared a few posts. I've enjoyed some of your music from time to time as well. So I have met you, and I've seen you really enjoy what you do.
Cheers, mate. Yeah. I think without music, I don't know what else I'll do.
And when I see somebody performing in the way that you do, I get a little bit envious, because the joy of giving and sharing something like music with others, to me is quite a dream that's kind of far away. But I love dreaming about it, and I love watching other people experience that as well. So I just want to sort of say thanks.
Cheers, mate. I really appreciate that. That is very humbling to hear, and that's sort of really my own goal, is just to be able to share what I love and to share my passion for music, and all about really giving back to people who love music, and sort of all coming together with music and sharing that whole love for it. So very much appreciate the kind compliment there, and much love.
Thanks, my pleasure. And you've raised a few light bulb moments for me during the things that you were saying. So there's a few. There's one in particular, and it's the inspiration porn mentioned a little bit earlier. I'm really interested in that because, you know, often when we look for things and we notice things are not working, we look for change, and change needs to occur. And often it's cultural change. And the little things with good intentions, such as inspiration porn, sometimes it's not poorly intended. Sometimes we try to, you know, strengthen somebody, and usually that's the case, but it needs to be addressed. And I see it way too often in the work that I do. And it's something I don't like. I haven't appreciated from my story as a migrant, for example. You can, you know, you poor thing, you've done really well kind of thing. You know, that's probably as far as I can relate to that personally. And I've never really appreciated it when it's overdone. But it's a really sensitive area where you don't want to actually hurt somebody's feelings by actually addressing something where they didn't have a bad intention. How would you suggest that we can do that systemically, not even as individuals even, to address that? It's almost like a cultural shift. Those little things, those little habits of ours are actually creating a lot of downers on us.
I just want to say I love that question, and if I answer it, I have a feeling I may get stuck on a loop just trying to answer that, because I literally like can talk about that for hours. Yeah, you are so right in the fact that it is, in my opinion, and I think, you know, that's one way to start, is that no matter who you talk about this to, everyone's going to have a different opinion. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. That's cool. But it is very much something I believe that is brought from the media and how we perceive people with disabilities. And oftenly, you know, it's, you know, say for example, the Olympics, say for an example, you know, they're often on, and lately it was brought to my attention actually by Meredith, who told me that they actually now get paid, which is good, which they should be paid, but they weren't being paid before, and I find that really strange. So it's like also to, you know, equal rights is also one other thing that's very hard to change. And I think that it comes with not changing a whole bunch of people, but changing one person at a time. And it's just changing the way they think, and that I think they have to want to change, and they have to be open to change. And I think because of, say, how the world has seen people with disabilities previously, they associated with a negative sort of impact, and more of like to have a disability sucks, to have this is bad, or it is generally looked at as a bad thing. And it's something that I've thought to myself a lot about, particularly in my teenage years, and only just recently, and I'm talking within probably the last 6 months, that I've done like a lot of self-reflective work and self-development. And I've realized I've actually come to love my disability, and say that it is not just a part of me, but it's also who I am. And I think it rocks, because it's a part of me that makes me appreciate life so much more. You know, because there's always going to be someone that has it worse off than you, but doesn't mean to say that you're struggling any less, or that they are struggling any less. It's the fact that they have their own separate challenges. And I think it's just something that is really hard to be able to find. And I wouldn't have found that without someone by the name of Dr. Gabor Mate, who is a Canadian doctor, and who's just wonderful.
Thanks, Kareem. I could also, I didn't expect, you know, a clear answer on my first question, but thanks for sharing that as well. Maybe we can continue this conversation on, you know, that particular strain of you know, the world's problem. Another time. It's quite a big question, and it's one that we can keep working towards.
Definitely.
And maybe a yes or no question, if I can. So if you could choose, and if you had to choose to spend either time with people who find it really difficult to change, because earlier you said it's rare to change attitudes, you know, when you're referring to the service providers. If you had to choose, and you could only spend time with people who were willing to learn and were kind of there, and you could actually spread broader, or would you spend more time with people who kind of aren't there, not getting the gist of things, but they sort of needed the change more than anybody else? Which, if you had to choose, you know, which one would you start off with? First.
I'd honestly, if I think about it, I'd start off with the people who aren't willing to change. Because even if people are already halfway there, there's a good chance they just need a little bit of extra something for them to sort of go, you know, when you have that light bulb moment and someone's like explaining something to you, like, and you just go, oh, now I understand. And then there's that clarity, that light bulb moment per se. And you might go, I understand now. And they're like, okay, yeah, cool, I get it. With service providers, I feel like that don't understand, it'll take them a lot of time. But the most effective thing I've actually seen work is hard cold proof. And I'm more than happy if we have time to share a quick little story about that, if that helps answer your question a bit more.
Yes, please. And I love your initial answer too. I didn't really think about what I would choose. I was kind of leaning towards both the whole time, and I love the way that you've gone.
Cheers, mate. Well, I mean, it's a great question, because it's one of those questions where you don't want to say no and you don't want to say yes, because they're both important. But there is one that's slightly more important than the other, but it depends on how you perceive it. What's your perception? And I love that. That's such a good question. So to answer that.
Sorry, can I just interrupt for a minute? I'd really like you to tell the story of that support worker in the nightclub.
I'm going to.
Yeah, great.
That's Thanks. The story I was going to, yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
So I can't remember which one, but the story has happened a couple of times over the years in different places. Although there was one night in particular, I think I was in Brisbane, and I was out clubbing in the Valley, which is a pretty notorious place, for those who don't know, for a lot of sort of how would you say it, like a lot of fights and sort of yeah, it's a pretty rough spot. And I was in a club that I was actually at Sub Rosa before I started working there. It was actually under the name Capulet before it became Sub Rosa anyway. There was this guy who came up and approached me and said, oh, like, digging your dance moves, man, like, absolutely so great to see you out here, like, you know, like, just doing you, man, and you know, you're just so inspirational on the dance floor there, you know, doing you. And he got like really emotional and kind of teary, which was weird. I don't know if you're on substances or not, but anyway, probably. Having said that, he said, where's your support worker? Which I then responded, I don't have one, I'm on my own. And he then said, oh my gosh, that is so cool. Like, what the hell? He was freaking out. It was like I triggered him or something. And he was like, oh my God, do you want me to stay with you? Like, do you need anything? Like, he became like instantly very protective of me. And it's something I still wonder to this day. If I had have told him, if I had a support worker or not, would that have made a difference? Like, so I find that little bit of information being the key there, and quite funny in a way of he then like perceived that totally differently. And he went on to say that he had a client who would love to come to gigs and stuff like that, but he gets very, very anxious and like he's not sure how to sort of make sure he has a good time, and you know, he wants him to enjoy life and have the same experiences. And I basically said to him, be there for him, you know, take him to a club, but don't hang around him like a bad smell, you know. Just support him when he needs it. Like, let him try and come to you if he can, if he has the ability, you know, and, you know, just be around there for him. You know, you don't need to be, you know, following his every footstep. You know, I think it's quite a touchy subject, but he was very moved by the end and ended up buying me a drink, and we had a chat about a few other things, and then yeah, I think he left, and I woke up at 3 a.m. the next morning.
Thanks, Karime. It sounds like to me that somehow his own thoughts were almost superseded by some external information that he was fed for a while, and he responded with that automatic thought rather than his own. It felt like he was groomed really well by the sort of systemic.
Definitely. And I will just add, he was quite young, probably about 25, 27. The sort of like, I feel like if they were older, it might be harder to change the way they think, because of, obviously, depending on their age and when they were born, sort of how they were introduced with people with disability, how their perception of the world is. If they're a very black and white person, it can be very hard to change that. And that just is very much, I think, a generational thing. But it really depends on the person. But just wanting to add that little bit in there.
Karime, would you also like to tell the story of having struggles with access and what you've done to be able to help educate some of those businesses that you've come across?
Yeah, 100%. So there was actually an incident this year, and I think I'll probably use that as a more a better example, because it was well, I might use a combination. So one club in Brisbane that has closed down, I think they used to be called Family Nightclub, and they were great back in the day. They sort of were one of the first clubs in Brisbane, and they had 5 floors. They had a lift that went to all floors except the 5th floor, because I actually can't remember why the reason was. I think there was some reason, but anyway. Although recently, due to COVID and financial problems, they suffered a lot. So the original owners sold the building, someone else bought it, and then they sold it again, someone else bought it, and then it just became like a rental space, I guess. And so a company would actually rent the space and then put an event on. So it's pretty empty all the time. But recently there were some pretty big modifications to it. And when I went there for an event recently, probably maybe about 2 months ago or more, they had added in 2 steps down to the main dance floor. And this completely outraged me, because it was 100% flat when you first had ever been to the building. Why would you put in a set of stairs Like, it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. So I got pretty annoyed about that. Unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot I could do because the team that was there were a sub team, like a contracted catering company to sort of be in the venue. There was no direct manager as such. So that was really hard. So how I got around that, I just said, well, this isn't good enough. I've driven 2 hours from, Byron Bay to come to this event. And what, you're just going to say, oh, sorry, you can't get in here. We can refund you the ticket, and yeah, you're just gonna have to go somewhere else. I don't want a refund. I want to be able to see this band I paid money to see, and I traveled 2 hours to see. So I made the security guards pick up my chair and carry me down. And they were like really sore afterwards. And I was like, yes, well, you shouldn't have put stairs in. And maybe your guys wouldn't have had to do that. A better example of accessibility would probably be the former club Subversa. It was known as Capulet back in the day. They had an accessible toilet that was used as a storage room for just general equipment like brooms and cleaning brushes and stuff like that. And I needed to go because none of the toilets in Brisbane at that time were working. I think in the Valley, there were 2 clubs that I'd already tried and their toilets weren't working. The main toilets in the Valley weren't working and are pretty disgusting also. And so Subversa was with Capulet at the time was like, so our toilet is inaccessible due to all the equipment that we have in there, and it doesn't work. We're really, really sorry. You can't go. So I had to go back to my hotel and use the toilet and then go back to whatever I was doing at the time. And when I told Mum about it, she was really outraged and wrote a letter. And then the next time I went, they were very apologetic and, basically rolled out the red carpet for me and said, like, whenever you come, we'll give you like free entry, free drinks, like, because we said, if they don't do anything about it, we'll take them to the Board of Human Rights or something like that. And yeah, I think it shouldn't have to be that hard where you have to basically threaten someone or a company. Like, I don't like being the person of power or having to go to that extent and of sort of resorting to that. It can be resolved quite simply by moving a few objects or asking the person, okay, damn, I see that there's a step here. How can we best accommodate you to get up here? Like, what do we need to do? And, if you tell us, we'll get it done. It shouldn't be that hard. And, I get that they can get away with it in that location because it's not enforced in the rule book and because it's an older city, so the buildings are quite old, but still there is no exceptions.
Thanks, Karime. Look, I can see where you get your feistiness from, mate. That passion and fire to make things change, because changing it for yourself is one thing, but it always benefits other people as well, eh?
Definitely. Yeah, even just talking about it, sort of, I could feel myself getting a bit heated. That's just, I think it's like something that I'm passionate about, just like my mum, and I think, that's just one thing I love about her, and just, you guys as in general as the UTA Institute, you've come together with as a collective, and you've just even now, started to make such a big difference and a movement as a whole, which is incredible to see in such a short amount of time, and to see the traction that you've gained behind it is quite incredible. So I take my hat off to you, Michaela, and obviously to you, Meredith, and to everyone else who is involved with YADA behind that.
Thanks, mate. We do our best. Can't do it without people like you, though.
Yeah.
So I want to, we've got a bit of time left. I wanted to see, does anyone else want to make any comments or any points, or maybe even some of the things that you heard that you might want to just speak in recognition around this topic of how do we build a bridge from the service client to the valued citizen?
Can I just speak to Sandra's question earlier a little bit? Sandra, your question was around to Karim, how did he ignite the spark within him for change from a service provider to directing his own supports? And I think it came from a place where what he was being given was just so bad. And he knew, it was very clear that that's what he didn't want. And so sometimes it comes from that place of knowing what you don't want to then go, okay, let's flip that. And what do you want? So, and I think he got tired of being treated like a number. As he said, there were random people that would turn up at the front door going, I'm here to give you a shower. And he's like, no, you're not. I don't know you, and then them assuming that he'll, take his clothes off and they'll help him shower when, he was clearly not comfortable being able to do that, or them not turning up or being late, and, Karim having projects and things he needed to do and to go study and so on. So it just came from that a negative place, really, that spark of going, okay, enough's enough. We've had enough of this rubbish. There's got to be something better. And it is very difficult filling, early morning shifts for short shifts. But I think you really just have to really dig into your community. And like Karim said, skills can be acquired. It's just finding the right people with the right attitude. So I hope that helps you a little bit with that question.
Yes, thank you both for answering my obviously maybe quite obnoxious or old question that you get asked a lot. But still, I feel sorry for having to go through a bad period to find out what you really want, or what your needs are, or how, sparking the question how your needs can be met better than they were at that time. I wish, and maybe this is also referring to your question, Michaela, why do we have to go from client to citizen? Why don't we start with citizen and never end there? Like, how can we stop the divide rather than bridging it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it comes down to history. I'm not sure about, what's happening in Germany, for example, but I know that in Australia, people with a disability, haven't had any rights. Traditionally, they've been institutionalized. They've been told what they need and given small, buckets of resources to go, here you go, that's all you're getting, that's all you get, that's all you're worth. And whether it's enough to cover their needs or not, they've always literally had to scrape and scramble and just get through, barely getting their needs met along the way. So I think for a lot of people, it's hard to dream.
Yeah, I agree.
So sometimes it is easier to say, well, what don't I want, rather than what I do want, because there is that history of well, this doesn't feel good. I don't like this. But, when you have someone with a disability who, has particularly someone who's complex and has a lot of diagnoses and has had surgeries and is in the hospital system, and they're caught up in that whole medical system where they've got to tick the boxes, and then if you don't tick the boxes, then you're not going to get, some resources. Then, you don't often have a choice or have time to go, there's got to be something more than just this. And I think when Karim was probably around 15, there was a real turning point for him. And he really took charge of his own life and went, you know what, I don't want to go to that medical appointment. I don't want to have to wear all these braces and things, and I don't want to look different because I already am different. I don't want to be made to look more medicalized by having to do all the things that the doctors and specialists are telling me to do. So then he decided from then on, he just wanted to live his life. And that's when he was able to really start dreaming and go, no, I don't like that. I don't want to keep doing that. You know, but you should be doing this, all the shoulds, you know.
I think, yeah, that's a really really well put, for sure. Thanks, Meredith. I just, yeah, I'm gonna elaborate on that a little bit if I can, and just say, yeah, I've particularly found it difficult in teenage years, and I think that anyone who has some sort of disability would feel it probably being more challenging in that sort of time period, particularly because I guess at that point you're in high school, your peers around you are probably going to be a lot different. There's a lot of peer pressure, and you know, you're still trying to figure out who you are, what you want to be, all these hormonal changes going on. So there is a lot to think about, not only physically but mentally as well. So I think, yeah, it's definitely that age point that is quite the turning point. And I think on how we get people to change their mind about how they see people with disabilities is showing them physical examples of them doing something, you know, that they love, and then saying, you know, like, this is them trying to do their best selves. It's not the fact that they're inspirational because they can do it. It's them having the ability to do it, and you know, they made that choice. You know, don't look at them as an object as such. Don't objectify them. You know, make it more personalized, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Karime and Meredith as well for answering that. Sandra, I was thinking sort of the same thing in relation to the question, how, you know, how do we move from serviced client to valued citizen? So how do we shift, you know, towards, or how do we build a bridge? You know, maybe there's a bridge already there to some degree for some, and maybe not for others, but I really get the sense of the question. And if I take it into service provision in general, taking away the disability, what we essentially always want, according to what we need, is actually good customer service, right? So we want something, we know what we need, and we want it to be done ethically, we want it to be done respectfully, and we want it to be done as if we are the customer, you know, with all of those cliched supports that a customer should get, including the customer's always right, almost, because it's a paid service, and continuing, you know, to support the customer. That adds to that kind of customer service, makes you feel like a valued citizen. And my example is when I go to a doctor, and I go to random doctors. I've never had a GP in my life that I saw more than a certain amount of time until I moved to the next area, and I just continued. But you know, I don't settle on one in my local area for a while, because when I walk into the surgery, I sense, you know, some GPs are looking down at the ground. They don't really want to know my history. Why do you want a blood test, Alex? You know, and you don't need to get one. That's just going to cost more time and money. And there's almost like you're not noticed as a person, and I don't want to see that person. You know, and several times, and then you come into a room where you don't know the knowledge base of these doctors, but I'd rather be with the doctor who notices me. You know, and even if he seems a little bit loose and he tells me, oh, I don't know, and I get a sense that he's maybe Googling, you know, something before he diagnoses me, I'm kind of okay with that. And I would rather be with a person who gets me and wants to get to know me than someone who can just do the job. So I think even the stuff that you mentioned earlier, Karime, the personal care supports, really intimate stuff. You can't just have somebody who's good at that. Practically, you want someone with a set of values of respect and being able to ask questions, and you know, that can value you as a human being. That's a really tough thing to guarantee.
100%, yeah.
For service providers, I guess, thinking from their perspective, to guarantee they're going to send someone with that is a really hard thing. It's about creating more of that well balance, perhaps, where the bridge can be strengthened in a way, getting a really good balance of that ethical composition, whatever it might be. And I know it's subjective as well. You know what I think. It might be the right way, might not agree with somebody else.
That's why it's so hard, I think, is like, because everyone has a different way of doing things. And that is one of the most common reasons why I don't go for people when choosing supports with such service providers, because, they'll often, I've had so many people that come sit down and say, well, I've been working in aged care for X amount of years and, I have a cert for in disability. Okay, that's great. Like, great for you. Congrats. But that tells me fuck all about what you can do. Like, what can you provide me? Like, what are you just, if I sit down on a chair and say, oh, I need you to wash my back and do this, are you just going to go whip out your handbook and look under page 39 and see if there's a way how to do it? Or are you going to actually come to me and say, hey, Karim, I haven't done too much personal care before, but what would you like me to do? Not what I think is good.
Absolutely. And there might be people out there who say, look, just do whatever you need to get the job done and see you next week.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't want any small talk, as long as it's respectful. And I think it's in that, I think everyone deserves that. Everybody wants that. Nobody wants to be disrespected as a customer of anything, when you're getting, and sometimes that's done accidentally. I don't know. It's, yeah.
So the feeling of being heard too, So I think that's a really important thing, like being able to hear the person and being felt like, okay, great, I feel valued. You walk away from the doctors and you get a sense of like, yep, I feel like that doctors get me, like he's going to look after me and he has my best interest, rather than him just not.
I think it's important to point out that Karim absolutely chooses all of his own supports. And often if they ask me questions, I ask them to direct the questions at Karim because it's not about me, it's about him.
That's a really funny one, actually. I do remember like a lot of them will actually look towards Meredith and ask the question, which is fine. But then having said that, when they ask me, I'm sort of a bit, I guess, struck at first and go, oh shit, I don't know what to say. But I think really it's just a thing of, I don't know what to say because I haven't really been asked that question a lot. It's always been asked for me, so I've just gotten used to it. So it's also, I guess, on myself as well a little bit to take the charge forward and probably start saying, well, actually, why don't you ask me instead of assuming it? But I think it goes both ways, actually. I don't know. It's a very, very hard topic to cover, and I think it just really depends on who you talk to. But if you have a good network of people and that who are open-minded and that who are willing to change, you're on the right track.
Yeah, thanks, Karim. There's a lot to be said for gut feelings, about the right match and the right people in your life and who we want the support from. Thank you for sharing your wisdom today. Some real gold nuggets for me, and thank you for that.
My pleasure.
So buzzed that you're into Gabor Mate.
He's a lifesaver.
Oh man, yeah. Honestly,
when you introduced me to him, I like was instantly just like, okay, this is my life now. It's just like such a eye-opening experience.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Me too. Same for me as well. It really shifted a lot of my thinking as well. Glad it's done that for you too. But we're going to run out of time, so I'd like to see if we can end today's session with a checkout. And thanks again, Meredith. got some good funny ones for us today. What kind of car are you today and why?
Wow. Was not expecting that at all, but then neither was I expecting the vegetable. What kind of car and why? I'd probably be a 1969 Trans Am Mustang, because it's, I don't know, it's one of my favorite cars. There's just something about it. It had a lot of history, and it just looked so sexy. Yeah, I don't know as too much of why, but that's what kind of car I'd be.
I think I'm definitely not a sexy car today. I'm an efficient car, something like a 1.23 liter. I got heaps done today. I've marked so many things off my things to do list today from late last night actually, and I had a reasonably short sleep, and I continued again today. And here I am still. The day's nearly finished, but I just feel like I've actually achieved so much. So I'm an efficient car, an economical car, maybe a Tesla. I don't know.
I was just about to say, you sound similar to like a Tesla or something.
Yeah, thanks, Kareem. You felt the vibe there, yeah.
They're also very nice looking cars, Alex. Very sleek.
Yeah, I need to look at them a little bit more. I've seen a few of them, and I can't remember them. Do you know what I mean? The line, there's something. Yeah, I need to have a closer look. When we finish, I'm going to pull up some.
You can do some Googling.
Yes, some nice images of Tesla.
I was parked next to one this afternoon, and I was on a phone call, so I did admire the sleek lines and the fact they have no door handles that sit on the outside. It's all very streamlined, and yeah, it was a pretty sexy looking car.
Yeah, hopefully they'll be the future. You know, that kind of thing. We really will benefit if we sort of move towards that sort of electric car thing. That's everything. Kareem, thank you very much, man. A real pleasure to listen to you today and to be able to have start some really good conversations. Thanks, Michaela, and
yes, thank you.
And Sandra, nice to meet you.
Likewise. Thank you for your ideas and your contributions, Alex. I'm not sure if it's the same brand name in Australia, but I feel like a bobby car, the small ones that toddlers can sit on, because I get the feeling while listening to you and rethinking the ideas that I have so much to learn, and I feel eager to grow and maybe stretch a bit more to get more of influence with the things that I gathered and learned today. So yes, I'm looking forward to being pushed and also growing into something more effective.
I'll pick up the piece. I have to combine. I want an electric combi. Like my next car, I actually want. I'm waiting for it to be able to come to Australia as an electric MG, because it's a sports car. I'm living by the beach now, but I have to have an electric because I'm really I just want to be environmentally conscious. But my heart is always with a combi, because it's just, combis have always symbolized that flower power edge of change, of a bit of hippie, a bit of alternative. Yeah, and that's represents me.
Love that.
And they're built in Germany.
Hey. Please don't.
I love that combination, an electric combi. That's awesome.
Actually, it wouldn't be too hard to do, I imagine.
So I'm going to say I used to have a 1969 EH Holden, which I loved. And Wednesdays are a tough day for me because I'm up early and I'm up late and they're pretty busy. But it also gives me the kind of cruising vibes that I aspire to have on a Wednesday, even though it's been pretty productive. I don't love the fact that they're a bit of a gas guzzler though. So maybe an electric EH would be pretty cool. Peace back.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be putting out the video of this. Thanks, Karime. Thanks, Meredith. Alex, good to see you. Sandra, good to see you. And we'll be back next Wednesday. We've got 3 more sessions to go, and we'll be putting out the next round of questions shortly.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank
Have
you.
a good night.
Thank you.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.